What's up, people? It's Ben back on another episode of Getting Crazy with Crazy Wars. I know it's been a while, but today we have a special guest. We have Kimberly with Global Aware, who is doing great things all across the world, should we say. She's giving back to people, making wheelchairs for people, and making homes and everything accessible and fixable where they can use them. And this is cool because it's usually in third world countries where people don't have a lot of things and it's short-term service projects. So we're going to talk about that and see what she's up to.
Ben,
Hey,
thank you
Camille, how
so
you doing?
much. I'm doing great. I'm so excited to be with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about Global Aware and how it got started and what you're about.
So, it's funny. I really didn't set out to do it. It's just one of those things where you kind of pursue the things that interest you and cause you joy. And I found myself doing this. Really, it's a long story, but um, the main thing we do are short-term service projects all around the world. And the big issue when I started this many, many years ago was I couldn't find anyone that would take me short term. Everybody was willing to take you if you would stay for a few weeks or a few months, but it takes so long to train someone to do things that most people don't want short-term volunteers, even though that's usually in the United States and Canada, people usually only have a few days to give at a time. And that's really, that was the genesis of it.
Oh, cool. So what does short-term service mean to you? Define it to yourself. What does it look like for you?
So for me, the two guiding missions we use for what service looks like are projects that will help people be independent, anything that will help that, or anything that will help um, one of our volunteers really get to know and understand the life and culture of the person where they're serving alongside. So we really have those two pieces. One, to help our minds understand each other, and the other one is to help each other be independent. And so that can look different in every country. You did a great intro. Yeah, so yes, in Kenya, for example, we build wattle and daub style homes. This is all with locally found materials in the local way, and it's all led by locals. And in Cambodia, where we are assembling and distributing wheelchairs to landmine victims, most of those landmines were actually put there by the Vietnamese and United States governments back in the Vietnamese War. So to me, there's a bit of a helping close the loop that we would be there helping the victims who are still stepping on these mines. So really, it can look very different in every country because the local community decides what it is that's important to them that will help them sustain themselves.
Okay, cool. So, what does short-term service look like for someone who's never been on a trip or thinking about going, or might listen to this and be interested in it? What does it look like? What can they?
So, so in a way, the process of being on a short-term service project is not dissimilar to someone deciding they're going to go on like whether it's a cruise or a camp or something like that, because they go to our website and they decide where they want to go and on what date, and then everything else is basically fed to you after that. So they're all 1 week programs that start on a Sunday and on a Saturday. They're tax deductible. They're about $1,500. Includes everything but airfare, but the airfare is also tax deductible. And when a volunteer arrives, well, we send a packet and we have videos and podcasts and all that. For if people want to have a lot of information before they go, we've got it. For people who just want to show up and learn everything there, that's fine too, because we have a coordinator who picks our volunteers up and shepherds them through the entire week, because we need somebody bilingual with our volunteers with these small teams the whole time. So we provide all the food, the accommodations, the in-country transportation, the project materials, our leisure activities, cultural activities. We spend a lot of time with the local community. So we will work somewhere between 4 and 7 hours a day. It just depends on how fast we work. We're working alongside locals. So getting to know one another is just as important as the work. Everyone comes to the projects with very different skills, and different limitations and different strengths. So it can look very different for each person.
Well,
what they do. So we even have, 1-year-olds and 2-year-olds on our programs. We have 95-year-old programs. What they do may be very different from somebody else that's on the trip.
Well, that leads me to my next question. So, what is something that companies and corporations can bring back to their companies or corporations and use into their trainings or their establishments or their videos? Something they learn. What's something that they can bring back, and what have you heard companies bring back to the from their stays or their time with you?
That's a great question. And it's funny, I don't know that I would have been able to answer that very well maybe 15 years ago, because that was about the time a bunch of companies started going on our programs, and we weren't exactly sure why at first, but it was a great win-win-win because the local communities were winning, the volunteers, the staff themselves were getting to reconnect and bond in a non-competitive way, and the companies were getting a non-taxable benefit to their employees and good PR, all of that. And we've seen that from a company's perspective, it really helps with recruiting and retaining good quality staff, the kind of people who want to care about the world and make it better. And it allows them to use their free time. Many companies, how people will get vacation time. Many companies now will give extra time if they use those days for volunteering and serving. And they will allow each employee to take $50 out of their paycheck, and they'll match it, doing contribution matching. So at the end of the year, an employee for a company can decide wherever they want to go on any of these 26 countries in the world. And essentially the company's paid for half, and then the volunteer gets that, $600 or $700 right off from their taxes. And they're not taxed on it as a benefit because it's all going to the local community. So it's interesting. I didn't go seeking that, but we find companies getting all of that out of it. And then when the employees come back to work after the short 1-week reset, they feel super grateful for the quality of living that they have, being able to have running water and electricity, actually feeling the joy and gratitude for these simple things. And then the volunteer, the staff member also feels those things, that joy and gratitude. So really, it's a strange, magical triumvirate that the company, the employee, and the community all win from. And we'd never thought to reach out to corporations before, but they found us somehow.
That's awesome. Well, I have a very interesting question that you probably never been asked before. So, how would someone like me that wants to serve and can't really physically do anything, what kind of stuff do you have that they could mentally do to help out with things during the project or while they're on the project? What can they do mentally if they can't physically do so? How do you do people like that?
So here's what I've learned is that it's all about asking questions, because each person has very different things they can do. So this is why we have small teams. We try not to have more than 10 at a time, so that we can work with the volunteer on what can you do, what do you like to do, what do you want to do. These are the areas of need we have, and then our coordinator works in conjunction with the volunteer. And the further in advance we know this, the more we can specifically plan for those projects. We really try and personalize the service experience. And I should say here, and this is very important, Ben, a lot of people are envisioning when they're serving, the word help and service is on their mind. And that's a part of it. But more importantly, our volunteers are learning. They're learning. So they're usually going to be doing something they haven't done before. And how much movement do they have in their fingers might impact whether they're doing a painting or smoothing concrete, whether or not a person has good temperature regulation will determine which countries are good for them. There are people who have breathing difficulties, and we recommend going to our higher altitude locations. So this is where, each location really brings its own offerings and opportunities in terms of serving. And we really try and work that out between each volunteer and program location. And one of the things that separates us, in this AI world where anyone trying to call a store, I feel like you so quickly get looped into an AI bot, and not hard to find a human. We still have humans that answer the phones immediately. And so this is what I mean by we work with human to human. And then when you get on location, it's human to human. We do have some remote service opportunities that we do, working with communities. And so we work individually with volunteers who are interested in doing that kind of thing to let them know, hey, if you are comfortable doing Zoom learning experiences, then that might be something that works for the volunteer. So we really try and personalize it is the real answer.
That's awesome. So I'm going to combine two questions in one. So we talked about how people with disabilities get involved. Have you had anybody with disabilities, like in wheelchairs, like me, serve and do things?
Yes, we absolutely have. But one of the things we do have to think, so there are logistics that many of the countries where we work, where the work site might be fine, the accommodations might be fine, but the in-between logistics of having a mobility impaired person, if we don't have a good way, for example, if there's a lot of cobblestone or we haven't sorted out the right way, we will have to look at what are the logistics for each person in that country, because every country has such a different setup. Now, we work in Romania, exclusively with kids with special needs, and most of them, it's well, it can be everything from mobility impairment to being on the spectrum with different learning needs. And so we tend to have a lot of volunteers on that program, because it's just a really rich environment
That's
for
cool.
learning and sharing. Yeah.
So what is it like? How do you build that relationship with the locals, and what does that look like? Like when you first get there and you're trying to build a relationship with the locals to go into a country or a new country, what does that look like, and what is the process?
So, most of our coordinators, this is the lead person in each country. We've been working with most of them. Most of them are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s and have been doing this for years and years and years. They're from that community, but they're used to working with North Americans, and that's really key for us. So that coordinator keeps the relationship with the locals going at all times and is constantly meeting with them about, hey, what projects do we need now? This is how many volunteers we have coming. Are there any urgent needs that have come up? What have we completed? And so when the volunteers arrive, the coordinator has a variety of very structured activities to help the volunteers and locals get to know one another, both on the work site and on the prep day. So, for example, at the beginning of every day, the coordinator will begin with the discussion of a question designed to tease out some interesting part of that culture that a traditional tourist would never know. So, for example, in Costa Rica on Monday, Federico might at breakfast ask everybody, hey, did you know that in Costa Rica we've never used traditional street addresses? We don't have street numbers or street names. Nobody knows the zip code. And it starts this discussion on, well, then how do they get mail? How do they get deliveries? How do they do Amazon? And it helps you also see how our default expectations on how a life is worked may be based on very different things. And
That's
so it's our coordinator through those kinds of structured activities that really leads that integration between the locals and the volunteers. They're the magic, really.
that's awesome. So what is like the one word or things that you see all the time that varies? That's the same in every culture. Is it like love, respect? Like what is one word or a situation where every culture is similar? And what have you learned from the
Oh, so
similarity
many
of cultures?
there's so many things. Some of the basics that may be obvious is that everyone wants their kids to be fed and not hungry at night and sleep and not hear bombs going over their heads when they sleep at night. Everyone wants that for their loved ones, a full bellies and a safe home. And you see it everywhere. And then you see what happens too in communities when poverty, when there's a lack of jobs, a lack of products, a lack of access to healthcare and education. In almost every country, it has a similar impact. You'll find that in places where there are almost no jobs, usually there's, and again, this doesn't matter the country or the culture, you'll find a lot of self-medicating going on, So it's interesting. There are so many similarities. Certainly love, hunger, peace. Uh, so there's so many more things that bind us. And yet we really think it's fun to see the differences too, because it makes the volunteer question what are their own defaults, at least get some kind of a little bit of a far view on their own life to think, am I doing this because it's the best thing or the right thing? Or am I doing this because it's all I've ever known? You know?
Yeah, that's cool. So I've listened to a lot of your podcasts and done research before I did this. And I remember you saying on one of the podcasts, you said a lady asked you, she said, what word would be your greatest word? And you said impact. That really hit me because what do you feel like your organization's greatest impact? And what's the story where you really saw the impact your organization was making that really touched you as an organization? And is there something that you think about every day, maybe a person that keeps you going every day that you keep in touch with? That reminds you every day why you keep doing this?
So I would say the number one impact that we're seeing is the brain space that changes for both the volunteers and for the local communities, because the local communities think now of our volunteers and our culture as being one of love and peace and help and nurturing, and they're less likely to want to bomb us as a culture because of how they see us now. And on the flip side, our volunteers start to really love, know, and care about and appreciate the different challenges in another culture, the real beauties and the real challenges. So it's really the brains that are changed on both sides, because Ben, remember how I said that learning is a key piece. All of the projects that we're doing, all of them, the locals are faster and better at it.
Yeah,
Always, right? So it's what's happening in between our ears for everybody. Um, seeing the good in each other, that glowing, growing, expanded mind,
that's
and the love of humanity. Again, outside of a competitive dog eat dog world, we're all, of course, understandably caught in the routines of our lives, which can make us blind to some of the beauty of life around us. And sometimes just putting yourself in a new setting like this with new people and new surroundings can really have a huge impact in a very short period of
it
time.
will make you feel humble for what you have back at home.
Oh, right.
They don't have a
Yeah.
lot of that stuff where you go, so it makes people feel humble and think about it. So I've heard you talk about like the cultures and having the staycation, but also mixing in pleasure to learn the culture. So what is the biggest thing that people take away from going to the events or the activities? What's the biggest thing that they love that you do? And what's a story that really someone got involved and learned something they didn't know before?
You know, uh, so many examples. It may be hard to land on one. You had asked earlier, um, the impact and the kind of change it can have on someone. And it reminded me of this boy. He was probably 12 on our Guatemala program. And we have to pump the water there. It doesn't, it's not running water, and carry it in buckets. And that's hard work for somebody who hasn't ever done it. It is really hard work. And you see, as you're walking around the villages, all kids being bathed in it, water being boiled so it can be drunk. Everything comes from this pumped water. And as you said, when you get home, it really does make you grateful when you turn on your water faucet, and people are much more likely, for example, to turn their water off and on between brushing their teeth when they realize what a treasure it is to have water delivered right to your home. It really is incredible. So, but I've seen so many examples, people who, we were in the Philippines and we were going by a home, really a hut of a baby who had just been born. He had some kind of blood disease. I don't remember the name of it, but the family that was with us offered to go to the hospital with that family and our family and pay for all of that child's Medicare. And it was something like $1,100. And it essentially saved this kid's life. And that wasn't anything our organization had on its plans. We didn't look for it. ask for it, create it. So sometimes it's the side things that happen, the moments that you didn't even see coming, where people are just reaching out around them to what they see is needed and what they might or might not have. And you could write a check from anywhere in the world, obviously, but somehow getting to know a person and be a part of that touches you differently than just writing a check. Being there and getting to know them and seeing it, oh my gosh, this saved a life, this $1,100 that it's, it's a lot of money here. Well, it's an impossible amount of money in many other countries, and it can save a human,
Yeah.
So
And many
I've seen
other
so many.
in many other countries, if you get $1,100 check, you're rich. Like you can do a lot of stuff with it, and it can go for months. So as we wrap this up, what's the number one thing that you want to say to people and give them advice if they're a little hesitant about doing this or why they need to get involved or how it can change their life?
The number one thing I'd say is to not be led by fear. Um, if you're ever looking to serve or learn about a culture, I think a lot of people begin with, what won't I have? What won't I be able to do? What kinds of dangers are there? And we're not the only organization that does this, that we look for places where the environment is safe and where we can work with people to make it enjoyable for everyone. So the number one thing would be, do not let your decisions be led by fear with this or anything else, and you'll find yourself in a lot better place.
Okay, so where can people find you and how can they get connected with you and learn more about the organization for themselves?
Oh, Ben, thank you for asking. So really, we have a very large digital footprint. So any way someone might search for the name Globe Aware, uh, they'll find our podcasts that explain about cultures and the things you can find and what there is to do. We've got videos, YouTube channels, certainly our website, all of our social media, and our phone number. And anywhere you look with that name, with Globe Aware, you will find us. And we love talking to people about our projects and programs.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate everyone listening. And it was great having you on the podcast. And I hope now that we've been on the podcast, I hope we keep in touch and I can follow you and follow the organization. We can do some more stuff together.
Ben, thank you so much for having me. I'm really grateful. Thank you.
No problem. Put a battery in it.